Hi everyone, happy October Native Plant Month. My name is Mark. I'm here with the three musketeers of Cuplet Fern, Jennifer, Gia, and Kaylee. Welcome to another webisode of Garden Chat. Our topic today is Fall in Love with Florida's Fall. There's so much beauty out there um, that we're hopeful that you can recognize through this presentation in the following weeks to come. So get out there and enjoy yourselves. Embrace the cooler weather. Definitely comes with a cut in Florida's humidity, so it becomes a little more bearable these times of the year. So welcome everyone. Let's get briefly started. So yes, there is a Florida fall here. Our presentation will cover some select native plants just to give you a taste of many more that are out there. So this is just a very short list of many, many, many more native plants that do exhibit some interest during this time of the year. Join in on the discussion. So we will be taking your questions and comments live. So share your tips and experiences with us. We'll be happy to post them onto the live stream as well. So it is viewable and shareable to others. And then, of course, subscribe, like, and share this video. So help promote the usage of native plants local to your region. So we're very, fervent about prioritizing and promoting native plants, especially if they're local to your area. A special thanks goes to University of South Florida, also known as USF, their Plant Atlas, which has become almost like the go-to quick and easy reference sheet for many of us. Wildflower.org, actually from Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, provided some very useful information for this particular presentation. And of course, fnps.org. There is a tab on fnps.org, FloridanaTivePlantSociety.org, that says native plants. So if you click on that in the drop-down, you'll see native plants for your area. And then you can browse through a wide selection of native plants through fnps.org as well. And of course, let's not forget all our friends on social media. So without them, many of these pictures would not be possible. And one little caveat, so we will be talking about edible plants and some usage of them, but we do not endorse the consumption of any wild plant. So please consult your physician before attempting any of those things. So if you do hear any comments or us in just normal discussion talking about teas or jellies or any of those things, we do not endorse direct consumption without proper consultation from your physician. Come learn with us. We're a very eventful chapter. Go to fnps.org. There's a button that says join or join us. Just simply click on that. And if you happen to be in the region that we serve, please select Cuplet Fern from the drop-down, and it's easy as that. They have so many different types of memberships. They have a nonprofit, they have business level, household, student. So there's something in there for you. And let me introduce our wonderful directors. Gia is the creator of the Florida Native Plant Gardening Group. She also happens to be a citizen scientist. I really value Gia's critiques. Sometimes when people say, oh, it's that plant, she'll actually do her homework a little bit more and say, well, I kind of think that it's this species instead. So she is definitely a budding citizen scientist. And I'm so happy to see her grow and evolve into her journey with us. Kaylee happens to be a rural Seminole preservationist. She also happens to be a rare plant lover. You'll definitely see Kaylee along with Gia on the roadside trying to take pictures of cool, unusual native plants. But yes, Kaylee's very, very passionate about her own particular yard, as well as the unique charm that rural Seminole has. Jennifer Hopton-Villalobos is slightly north of us in Lake Helen, and she is their environmental advocate. She happens to be a huge advocate of invasive plant removals. Matter of fact, once we do start up on our invasive plant removal projects across the region, you'll see a lot of Jennifer out there because she is our invasive plant removal coordinator. So let me quickly begin on my couple of slides. I put together the first one is red maple. It has a narrow crown, as many of you know. It's a nice shade tree, and it happens to be very, very popular in Arbor Day giveaways. So if you have a city or a county-wide Arbor Day initiative, earlier on in the year, you'll definitely see red maple as part of their standard selection. It grows to 40 to 60 feet, and it happens to have red and yellow foliage. Upon further research, it was good to know that the yellow foliage is only specific to certain varietals of red maple. So the most popular, or the ones that are used primarily in urban landscape, happen to have the red foliage during this time of the year. They are very adaptable to wet and dry soils. If you happen to take the Florida Master Naturalist class, you learn that red maples just kind of got pushed into more wetland style habitats because they are intolerant of fire regimen. So when there is natural fires or fire regimens happening on drier sites such as scrub or sandhill, you will not find red maple there naturally. And it will completely defoliate during very cold winters. Here in Central Florida, it doesn't defoliate completely, but it does thin out quite a bit. And another interesting thing is when you have a young plant, it has a very handsome silver gray bark that aids towards more winter interest. So the young trees also have an additional quality to them. The next one is sassafras. You have red and rust foliage. It is a underutilized tree, in my opinion. We should see a lot more sassafras in, in urban landscapes, primarily because it is the larval host for some excellent butterflies, the spice bush butterfly, the tiger swallowtail, the palamedes butterfly. And in case you are viewing from the Panhandle area, another beautiful moth actually uses it as its larval host, the Promethea silk moth, but it's not found here in Central Florida. In case you're growing sassafras in the Panhandle, you will see this silk moth also use it as its larval host. Sassafras can grow to be 12 to 45 feet. It has a very aromatic bark. Sometimes this tree is called cinnamon wood for that reason. It does tend to sucker, but not aggressively. So it may form a small strand of sassafras over time, but that's easily manageable in case you just want a single specimen. A good thing to note about sassafras is that it is allelopathic, so its roots will inhibit the growth of other plants in its immediate vicinity. So keep that in mind. Here's a great picture of sassafras's leaves during this time of the year. Has fragrant flowers in late spring and black fruits that are eaten by birds late summer. Another good quality of sassafras is that it is a shade-tolerant plant. So please use sassafras, especially if you are thinking about using it as a larval host for some beautiful eye-catching butterflies. Persimmon is my last plant selection here. It gives red and yellow foliage. It prefers wet to seasonally dry soils. It will completely defoliate during cold winters here in Central Florida. Volusia, Brevard, Seminole, Orange. It is very typical for this tree to completely defoliate. Good thing to note, especially if you're trying this out in your garden, it is dioecious, so you do need a male and a female plant in order to produce its juicy fruit. And there is a picture of its most delicious fruit when completely ripe. When it's a little underripe, it has that astringent or kind of a bittery dry quality to its taste. But when it's ripe, go ahead and harvest it. If you don't, the wildlife in your area will certainly beat you to it. So it's a very handsome tree, and it gives nice, decent sized fruit. It is the larval host for the Luna moth. So many of you know the Luna moth for its elegance and beauty and its light green, very attractive hue. So this happens to be the larval host plant for the Luna moth. it grows to be about 30 to 50 feet. If you grow this lakeside, it'll grow much taller. If you grow it towards an area where it's more seasonally dry than wet, then it'll be a little bit shorter. It is shade tolerant, so it's partly shade tolerant, not as shade tolerant as sassafras is. This can take some edges or basically the shadow of another tree in case if it's not planted too close to it. It will, like I said, defoliate completely in the winter. And here's a fall foliage look to Persimmon. It has deep roots, so underplanting. So in case you guys are interested in utilizing the same space for different heights of plants, underplanting around this tree is possible because its roots grow straight down. Sometimes people have issues with Virginia oak or other big trees that prevent having smaller shrubs or wildflowers growing underneath it. This happens to be one of those exceptions where underplanting is possible. And it is an adaptable plant, so it performs well in organic, fertile soils with easy access to water, but it is adaptable. So if you have a drier side, it can adapt to it. Kaylee, it's you next.
Alrighty. So here I have Florida Paintbrush. It's I kind of focus mostly on kind of xeric ones because that's what I have in my yard. So this is Florida Paintbrush, or also Carpophorus corymbosus. And it's got, there's some white variations, but mostly it's a purple with a light lavender color sometimes. And it likes dry, sandy soil. And it starts to bloom, I think right about now, right? Maybe within the last week or so, we saw some at this trail. Not this photo, but the next photo, or yeah, it was this photo that I took of the plant myself. That was at the trail that we went to, so it was recent. They're also a deciduous perennial. Most of the year, they're just a small little rosette of leaves on the ground. And then they come back in fall and they start blooming again. Okay. And then here's a closer up picture. There's many pollinators will use it. We saw many bees on them, all kinds of like little beetles and love bugs. The bugs were going crazy for it. So it's very good for pollinators. It would look good. It's tall, showy flowers, so it would look good in a wildflower meadow as like some height interest, maybe mixed with some, other purples and yellows and such in that kind of a meadow look. Yeah, I already covered that there's short rosette for most of the year. So yeah, it's just a small little thing for most of the year, and then it just shows off like this. And then the next one I've got, its cousin is vanilla leaf. It's also Carpophorus, but this is Odoratissimus. I got it, okay. And this one's also purple. It's more deep purple, and it's got a very, very strong, sweet smell of vanilla. This picture was from mine and Gia's hike out at Chiliota Wilderness area last week. And where this patch was, it was just, we could smell it everywhere we went on the trail. And so it's really nice for that. And it's really tall. It's taller than the other Carpophorus. And they can fall over, so they might need other stuff around them to kind of help hold them up. They like the dry sand and the full sun. We noticed that they were kind of on a seepage slope, so maybe they like a little bit more moisture than the other Carpophorus. And it's also a deciduous perennial. It has a rosette of leaves on the ground for most of the year, but they're kind of purple, like they're green with purple veins in them. And because of the strong smell, they used to be picked and dried and used to flavor tobacco. Not that anybody needs to do that now, but it was an interesting tidbit I came across. Okay. And it also attracts a lot of pollinators. We got very close to so many bees when we were taking these pictures. I don't know the species of that bee, but it was also covered in love bugs and other bees all over the place. So they're very attractive. They bloom right before Florida Paintbrush, within a couple weeks ahead of time. And then they're followed by the Florida Paintbrush. And then I didn't know of another Carpophorus, which is called deer tongue. I thought it was the same thing as the paintbrush. That apparently blooms a week later. So you get a full, like, several weeks of all purple. And they're very tall. They're good for in a wildflower garden too, like the paintbrush. They would be needing some support and structure around them because they're so tall, but they would stand out. And then I put goldenrod next to it because I was thinking of this being the pairing for those, as I thought that the purple and the yellow and the height together would be an interesting kind of backdrop for a kind of gradual wildflower garden where you'd have the lower stuff in the front and then the higher stuff in the back. And this one is, I believe, Pine Barren Goldenrod, I think. I have the actual picture for it, the next one. But yeah, so there's so many different varieties. There's 21 that I counted on the plant atlas. So that was interesting. Some are variations of other species. So there's subspecies and all that. And they're probably one of the most important pollinators. And because there's so many species, some will bloom early or earlier, like in late summer or middle summer, and then some will bloom in the fall. And it's just like an everlasting show of color for the end of the year. Okay. And so I listed a few that I find to be like the most common at nurseries. So there's Solidago stricta. It's also wand goldenrod or slender goldenrod. And then Solidago odora or odora vari Chapmani, I guess. It's Chapman's goldenrod. And there's two different varieties of that. That's one in the lower part and one's in the southern or upper part of the state. But they look like that middle picture there is that it's a little floof of goldenrod flowers at the top. And then there's also on the next slide, we'll have pictures of sempervirens and fistulosa. So on the left there, that's the Pine Barren goldenrod. That's pretty common, I think, on the sides of roads. I see it quite a lot. Or maybe it's just goldenrod is goldenrod. It's hard to tell the difference. And then on the right there, that's seaside goldenrod. That one's probably, I think I see that the most often in nurseries or for seed trades, at least. Maybe I'm wrong, not having visited enough native nurseries, but I see that one the most often. And that is coastal. It likes sand. So if you just dig a little deeper into the Latin name, you'll find which ones will work perfectly for your site conditions, whether it's dry or wet. Okay. And then I've got winged sumac. I wanted to add this one because I adore the red of it. It is very interesting. It has in summer like little tiny clusters of flowers, and then they turn into pink berries. And then as fall goes on, it turns into these red, bold leaves, and they're just beautiful. And birds leak berries. So it's very good for a habitat garden is what I'm trying to think of. And it's deciduous, so it loses its leaves after they've turned red, and then it comes back and repeats in the spring. I did not get information on whether or not they were male and female necessary. I'm not quite sure on that one. But I think that they're so weedy kind of that they will just reproduce. In the right conditions, they'll be very weedy. They like dry sand, full sun. They tolerate some shade, but they really like my scrub habitat. Okay, next slide. So I had here, I took this little picture of the flowers just to kind of show the teeny tiny clusters, and they were covered in ants. So I guess maybe ants might pollinate them. But the fruits there on the right, they're like these pink little clusters of berries, and the birds love them, or they've been used for a drink to make kind of a flavored lemonade kind of drink. And like Mark said, talk to a medical professional first, but I thought that was very interesting and wanted to include it.
Well, I'll just tell you that pink lemonade made from wild sumac is delicious.
I have to try it.
It's so tart and it's so good. So I'll personally vouch for that. But yeah, don't go out there in the wild and think you're having sumac when it might be a different.
Yes, always double check that ID. Maybe triple check if you're about to eat it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that was interesting tidbit, and I really badly want to try it, but I left my berries for the birds, unfortunately. Unfortunately. All right, so the next slide is where it's got this deep, deep red color, and it can be trained to stay, it can be trained to stay a shrub, but if you let it grow and it's in the right conditions, it will become a small tree. They can get up to 30, 35 feet. I have one out by my driveway that's probably about 20 feet. I think maybe the bigger they get, the sooner they turn color. I think I've noticed with them. But they are very vibrant once they get going. And then when all the leaves fall off, they turn into really dead looking sticks. But it's a very interesting large specimen kind of thing. If you get it to grow large, it would be a very interesting standout color in a fall garden. And then I added these reliable little guys is silkgrass or silver-leafed aster, Pithiopsis graminifolia. Yeah. So this one blooms just about year-round, I think, almost. There's maybe just a few months that they don't, but they're really reliable. They're low-growing. They will sprawl, and they love the sand. They're very forgiving of drought and sun. Horrible soil, anything you've got, you could throw it at it and it will keep going. They get mowed and they still pop back up. And they tolerate being walked on. They just kind of grow all over in my trail and I walk right through them, spreads the seeds some more. Yeah, they stay low, and then they've got these clusters of bright yellow flowers, and they're evergreen also. They will stick around all year. All right, next slide. They're, like I said, they're very hardy. They do attract quite a bit of pollinators. I've seen little beetles like this little guy in the picture on that one middle flower is hard to see, but it's not a love bug. It's some little black beetle with red on it. And I really always see like little green sweat bees and digging wasps underneath these plants, and then they go and they pollinate on, or nectar on the flowers. It's a really good gap filler. It will reseed itself and just fill in anywhere you want it to go, and be something as a ground cover. You can walk on it and just let it take the abuse. But it can get out of control. So you can mow it or pull it, whatever. You can't completely knock it back. It will keep coming back. I think that's all for those.
I had a question regarding silkgrass. Maybe Gia can also chime in. Have you tried propagating it with cuttings? Because most of the time people just reseed. Any luck with cuttings to propagate this plant?
I've divided it, but I haven't cut them. So maybe it'd be worth a shot. Gia?
I haven't personally tried it, but I've heard of people who have tried it before. I can't remember the outcome, to be honest with you, but I think I have heard of that done before. Mark, are you asking because you've heard of that before? Because I'm pretty sure I've heard of people doing that.
I've heard of it too, but maybe they were just talking about layering the plant, like air layering it, or just taking one of the long stems and layering a little bit of soil and then dividing it that way. But I've always been curious.
Yeah, it sprouts so easily from seed, though. It almost seems like, why go through the trouble, you know?
Oh,
it sprouts super easily from seed.
But yeah, they'll grow in clusters. They can be divided once the clump gets pretty mature. So,
you guys are such good photographers. Sometimes I mean, if you live out in the country and there's not a lot of artificial lighting from street lights, etc., try to take a snap of this picture in moonlight when all the flowers are in bloom. I wouldn't be surprised if there are nighttime pollinators for this plant, because all the flowers are bright white, bright white. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were nighttime pollinators for silkgrass.
I'll have to check that out, because I'm doing a little bonfire thing with my kids on Halloween, and that's out by where the silkgrass is going crazy. So we'll check it out.
Cool.
All right, and I think that might be my last one, and it moves on to the next.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
And folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment away during the live chat, and we'll be happy to take some and share our thoughts about any particular plant that you have in mind. Gia, if you'd like to take it over, that'd be great.
Yeah, so for the plants that I chose for this presentation, I chose a lot of things that are naturally occurring in my yard or in my neighborhood. And a lot of them are just absolutely my favorites to garden with. And this first one here is kind of going crazy in the neighborhood right now. It's narrowleaf sunflower, or swamp sunflower, depends on who you ask. But the peak blooming is pretty much now. I've noticed in my area, some of them are starting to slow down a little bit and go to seed, but maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the wetland areas, the open sunny wetlands, were just absolutely covered in these. So in my neighborhood in particular, I have a lot of people who say that they can't garden or they have trouble gardening because we kind of live in wetlands areas and our yards flood periodically. We're right off of Lake Harney, so we kind of have those issues here. And this is one way in which people really can just work with what you have around you. Take a look from, take a hint from nature here, and stuff will thrive in wet areas. And this is just an amazing wildflower. It is dormant most of the year, but in the fall, whenever it puts on its show, they can be up to, I believe it's like 5 or 6 feet tall, and they just get these masses of large yellow flowers. They make great cut flowers. They're a little smelly, but they look pretty as cut flowers. But these are absolutely one of my favorites. So these pictures that I took were the first one that you see there is from my neighborhood, where it's part of like the wet open area, and I don't know exactly what habitat it's called. I need to figure that out still. Some sort of wet prairie or something, I'm not sure. But this was only one area where you see just like clusters of it, and other areas it was like a carpet. It was just like a sea of yellow. So it's very, very pretty. They're a short-lived perennial, so they're not going to last forever, but they do reseed very well. So if you have an open, moist, sunny area, that you can maybe put these in the background and kind of forget about it, and then just be surprised every fall. They're just wonderful for that. Okay. Hyun Holly is another one that kind of grows in these wet conditions. It loves moist soil, and it's a very attractive tree. It looks good all year, but then the real show is in the fall when it gets these beautiful berries. They're probably about, I don't know, 6 millimeters. They're a little bit smaller than some other holly species in Florida, but very attractive to look at, and birds love them. So all the ones that I have in my yard, I will see cardinals in the trees eating the berries. So it's always nice to see that, it's attracting birds to the yard, and it's nice to sit there and watch them. And it's always a nice surprise, to see that. So another thing that I really like about this tree is not only the very attractive fruits, but also very often, because it grows in moist areas, and I've just recently kind of learned why this tends to get covered in lichens. So I had kind of looked into it, and I was curious, you know, is the bark really this color, or is it lichens that are covering it? So it's lichens, but it tends to like this smooth bark, and it likes the moist conditions. So these trees are more apt to have this, but it makes it very striking. You know, most of the trees that I have in my yard are covered with this white lichen. So you have like this whole white trunk, that just the snow white trunk, and then you have the berries, and it just makes a very attractive landscape tree. So this next one is not going to be a crowd favorite, and I know that. And and a lot of people consider this weedy, and that's okay. So, and the reason I'm bringing it up is I know that people probably aren't going to go out and buy this. This is Virginia creeper. You'll see this growing along your fences. You'll see it growing up your trees. But the berries, whenever it does get its berries in the fall, and whenever it does get these beautiful red leaves, it is incredibly striking. So it's got wildlife value, and it's very, very pretty when you see it creeping up your pine trees or along your fence, and you've got this fire red color, and it is very beautiful. And so maybe people wouldn't go out and purchase this, but if you have a spot that's out of the way and kind of want to, you know, foster it a little bit, help it along, it's really nice. And look out for those bright red leaves, and it is very attractive in the fall, and great wildlife value. So here's a couple more pictures that I just wanted to show you, like what it normally looks like. People confuse it a lot with poison ivy. I hear that so much, that in ID groups and all sorts of things, people will post pictures of this, and others chime in and say poison ivy. It is not. You can see it's got the five leaves in a cluster. Sometimes I have seen them with less. Sometimes they have 4, which is odd, but it happens. But they are not poison ivy. So, but they do turn colors like poison ivy. So if you're not sure, just don't touch it, you know. But again, those leaves are amazing. You know, when you just see the super scarlet climbing up the trees, it is beautiful. So that was one of my picks. All right, Elliott's asters. So this one is not quite blooming yet in my area. I don't know if it is in anybody else's, but it's getting there. So in my area, it tends to bloom pretty much after the narrow leaf sunflower is done. So I have this to look forward to. But this plant, I don't know if it's dormant most of the year, but exactly, it may be, but I don't see it, you know. It kind of goes back down, or maybe it's just a little rosette leaves. I'm not entirely sure. But I do see it start to come up in kind of the beginning of kind of late summer, I think, is when I start seeing it emerge from the ground, and I'll start to see this little spike get up and up and up and up and up. And then you'll see it just kind of starts getting little offshoots at the top. You know it's getting ready to bloom. It gets about, I'm thinking maybe about 5 feet tall, if I'm guessing, from the ones in my yard. But it can get very tall, I think between like 3 and 5 feet or so, approximately. And then whenever it blooms, it's just this mass of purple flowers. So obviously I like showy stuff. I like the masses of flowers. I'm a gardener at heart. So, and I love making flower arrangements too. I kind of like the artsy craftsy things. So I like things that I can use for cut flowers. So I've planted a bunch of these in my yard last year, and I see them coming up now, and I'm so excited. I can't wait. But this is, and they're very, since they're in the Aster family, of course, they're very attractive to pollinators as well. So on the left, this is yes, on the left, this is kind of what it looks like in nature, where it has the stem, and then it kind of has its cluster of flowers, which are probably about, I don't know, quarter-size flowers, approximately. And then you can see how pretty they look when grouped together, you know, in a vase right here. But in my neighborhood, they look like that out in the wild. So they grow in the ditches in my neighborhood, in the wet areas. And then when they're blooming, that's what you see all along the ditches for, you know, for 50 feet. You might just see purple. So they're very, very attractive. And it's one of those things that if you do have that kind of moist area in your yard, and it doesn't have to be super sunny, you could have part shade in there also, and they will do fine. But this was a good choice for that also. So Elias Lovegrass. So this is something that I've kind of recently fallen in love with. I never really thought much about grasses until, I had other people in the field kind of encourage using it more for wildlife value and all sorts of things. And so I've kind of started falling in love with more grasses. And Elliott's Lovegrass I really like because some of them are naturally more of a blue-green color. Some of them are just straight green. This one in the picture may not show up very well on the computer, but it's a very, very beautiful blue-green, powdery blue-green color. And that just adds so much interest when you mix it in with other things, because just that color pop is really cool. So even when it doesn't have all the seeds and flowers, it still looks very interesting just because it's a cool pop of color. But then in the fall, it gets these fluffy, delicate seeds, flowers that just kind of drape over and look very elegant and looks very neat. And so this has become absolutely one of my favorites, and very cool to look forward to in the fall when it gets those little wispy seed heads there. So, and this is just kind of showing a little bit of the difference in color you may or may not be able to see on your computer screen. Maybe a little bit difficult to tell, but some of them, like you see on the left, just kind of look like a normal green grass, and then on the right, it's kind of a powdery blue-green. So it's neat. You can kind of choose which one you like more. And sometimes nurseries have one or the other. It just depends. Naturally, in the one that's on the right was one that was nursery purchased. Although I do have them growing naturally in my yard also, that I recently found out. And I have the blue leafed ones in my yard, which is really cool. And naturally it's growing in, it was in my front ditch, which is where I found a lot of cool wetland stuff. But I've also seen Elliott's Lovegrass growing in very dry areas and scrubby areas that are kind of maybe a little bit lower in the scrubby area. So not quite as high and dry, but still. So it can handle some drought, it seems also. But it seems like moist to average soil is kind of what it prefers.
All right. Can you hear me?
Let me, just before I introduce Jennifer, there are some questions in here in our chat box. Ann Kennedy says, thank you for the information. Will your slides be available? Love the goldenrod. So, and yes, they will be available. They will be in our Facebook library, but I would recommend, since you're viewing this from Facebook, go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. That way you can quickly and easily pull up many different of our topics that are covered in several different videos. Matthew Hopkins writes, how much space is needed between sassafras and other plants? That's a great question. I would recommend, Matthew, to use this plant in shaded areas where you're having trouble growing other native plants. If you need a tree in a shaded area, try this one. If you're growing it in part shade and you don't have a lot of room to work with, maybe 4 feet away for other plants. But keep in mind also that not all plants will, succumb to the allelopathic qualities. So you'll find plants that are tolerant of, the sassafras, and some that are not. So through trial and error, I do not know the exact species that are going to be resistant to it, but through trial and error, you'll figure out what plants that you can plant much closer to sassafras. So yes, please keep your comments coming. And Jennifer, if you'd like to take over, that'd be great.
All right, great. I had a really difficult time picking plants, but I was happy to see that Gia and Kaylee chose lots of flowers, and that helped me narrow it down because there's so much going on during fall in Florida. It's like spring part 2, but also the trees are fading into their fall colors. But I noticed that, in residential neighborhoods, you don't see that as much. And I think a lot of people have picked the plants and the trees they've picked either because they get messy. If you have a tree that changes colors with their leaves, it means those leaves are going to drop. And not everybody wants to deal with leaves falling. And berries, some people get troubled by berries, but I think it's really important that we kind of have a switch in what a yard should be. Trees that drop leaves are providing habitat for different insects, and a lot of these trees I've found are the host plants for butterflies and moths, and they'll have their chrysalises or cocoons in the leaves that have fallen. And there's other types of insects that have habitat in there. And in Florida, we have birds coming down from up north, and they need those insects and they need those berries. That's their food. So if we're taking that out of our yards, and there's so many yards in Florida now, we're taking their food, we're taking their habitat. So somehow we've got to figure out how we can coexist with them and just let it be messy. Those messy leaves are mulch. That'll hold down the soil and keep it moist so you can grow other plants, and you don't have to deal with so much yard. So that's just me on my soapbox. So the first plant I've picked is bald cypress, Taxodium, Dysticum. I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Taxodium, Dysticum.
Dysticum. Okay, great. I learned my pronunciation through reading, and half the time it's wrong. This one I see all the time when I'm going down the highways and the interstates and stuff like that, the wetlands next to it, and I love fall and winter time with these leaves, and even springtime when their new leaves are coming out. They're beautiful. This is a long-term investment. It lives 600 plus years. So if you're planting one now, people will see this if it stays in place, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, their grandchildren. It's usually found in wet habitats, but it's surprisingly drought tolerant. I see it in shopping centers sometimes, and I know it's dry there. It's upland, it's not getting watered, it's next to pavement, so they can survive where it's dry. It benefits seed-eating birds and mammals. It produces these seeds at the end of the branches. And it's actually a host plant to the bald cypress sphinx. It looks kind of like a tomato hornworm. And the moth is kind of comparable, not quite as beautiful as a tomato hornworm, but remember, it's bird food. So you can see the caterpillars pretty large, so that's really good food for the birds. And here's a picture of the cypress growing in the water. This is a recent photo, so it's starting to change now. And just such brilliant colors all year round. It's a beautiful tree. Next. And this is another photo. It has cypress and sweet gum in it. So the cypress is kind of like the orange, yellow color, and the sweet gum is the red. And that's in an aquatic environment there. But it definitely looks like something people from up north might be missing. And we actually do have it. They're messy trees. And the other photo is just showing, that's definitely not an aquatic environment. It's not even a lot of soil. I think they're planted too closely together, so they're going to have to deal with that one day, but it's still beautiful for now. Next. And the next one is Pigment Hickory, Caria glabra. I see this one a lot of times when going on hikes, and it grows in moist, rich soil of oak hammocks to upland slopes associated with oaks. And this has a really long range from Ontario to central Florida. And when I think about trees that have a long range, I'm thinking there's probably a lot of wildlife that can benefit from them, especially those that are traveling down here. And it's a very important food source for mammals and birds. The hickory nuts are dropping, and that's something that animals will use throughout throughout fall and winter. And it's the host plant to the banded hair-streaked butterfly and many magnificent moths, including the Luna, funeral dagger, and the giant regal moth. And everybody knows what the Luna moth looks like, but I wanted to showcase another one that was gorgeous. I guess that's next. And I really enjoyed that picture, just looking at it from below, the sun shining through it and making the yellow just glow, and an image of the nuts themselves before they've gone brown. Usually when you find them, they've already gone brown. I was told by an old-timer locally that this woman, an older woman, she cracked these nuts open, and it took her all day to do it, and she made a pig nut hickory pie for him, and he said it was the best pie ever. But it took her a really long time, and she said she was never going to do it again. So it's probably a great delicacy to try something like that. Next. So here's the hickory horn devil. The caterpillar is fabulous in my opinion. I love its horns. And you can see it's a big juicy caterpillar, so birds probably like it too. And then the moth is gorgeous. The orange and the yellow, the veins. So if you want to see those around your house, now you know how to get it. Next. And this one I just discovered recently. I went to Green Owl Gardens and they were selling it. And so this is the Christmasberry, Lycium Carolinianum. And you can see it's got these beautiful red berries that birds love, and it also has purple flowers, and it's good for pollinators. It grows in wet habitats, but also it can grow in drier habitats. It's been seen growing between rocks and stuff like that. Go to the next one. So here's a close-up of the flower. It produces 4 to 5 lobed flowers in fall, but sometimes intermittently bloom throughout the year. It's actually related to tomatoes. So if you pop open the berry, you'll see the seeds resemble tomato seeds. So that's where you'll see the relation to it, because the flower doesn't really look like a tomato flower. And the leaves are small succulent leaves, so I was really surprised. It's in the Solanum family, Solanum. And it's a great food source for birds, benefits for butterflies and moths, so I like to include, really useful plants in my landscaping. And so that's one to consider. Next. And sweet gum. This one, I see this a lot in aquatic environments, but I've also seen it in yards that are more upland, so it's an adaptable tree. I think a lot of the reason you don't see them as much as you probably would otherwise, the seed pods are kind of spiky, and if you step on them, it can be a pain. But I think it's really missing from landscapes. It's so beautiful all year round. The leaves are star-shaped, and it's just got a brilliant color that it changes to. Sometimes in the beginning of fall, it'll start out with yellow, and it's almost like a rainbow with green and yellow and orange and red. And I like this landscaping picture here because it's got grasses and just there's a lot of beautiful grasses in Florida. So I think that's a really incredible idea to have, you know, these grasses that are changing and the leaves that are changing at the same time. Okay, next. And here's it provides seeds for birds and mammals. So those spiky seeds actually are a food source. It's noted for its aroma, and it's the larval host plant for Luna moth. I'm really surprised to see how many plants the Luna moth hosts from. I recently got a persimmon for that reason, and now I see there's lots of options. I'm pretty excited about that. Maybe I'll get to see them one day. I've never seen one in my yard. I guess that's it for that particular one. Next. And I just wanted to mention grasses in general. There are so many beautiful grasses. This one with the yellow inflorescences is called Lopsided Indian grass. And seeing that in groups it's a really amazing sight. It's definitely, if you're into having layers and grouping plants together, including grass is a really great idea. And this other picture is actually down the road in my neighborhood, and it's a really brilliant sight all throughout the year, but fall is definitely my favorite. All these different grasses are starting to go to seed, and you know, you have these low fluffy ones that start, and then the taller ones will start blooming, and then as winter passes, they all turn like yellow and orangish brown, and it's a beautiful sight to see. But we don't have a whole lot of these fields like this. People are mow happy, I guess, and so you don't get to see this these beautiful fall colors that we really do have. Go to the next one. And here's the one on the left is from Leonia Preserve. It's a scrubland habitat, and they had so many different types of grasses just growing together. And in general, just everything around there was really just how you would want to see it in your own yard. So beautiful, pristine habitat. And the other one's kind of blurry. It was actually a video, and just seeing the grasses waving together, the sun shining on it, it's incredible. And I think that was the last one.
Well, thank you all. Now's a good time in case you guys have any questions or comments. If you have other beautiful Florida fall plants that you'd like to share with us, please do so now before we conclude. Thank you for joining us. We're kind of finding our stride now, so our presentations are becoming very time concise, which is great. You know, as you probably are following all different types of groups and native plant pages, you probably know now is a great time to plant your seeds for next year. So if you have native plants that are blooming, you don't want to really pop them up or anything, you just want to put them back in the ground, go for it, you know, and let winter, you know, treat them. You know, sometimes they need a little bit of cooler temperatures in order to properly germinate come spring. So it's a nice time to just go ahead and do it and take advantage of the lower humidity that we're having. And if you're anything like me, you're playing some serious catch up with your garden right about now. So get out there and embrace Florida's fall. That is our recommendation to you. And I think Gia has something to say. Oh,
I have a question. I have a question for Jennifer, actually. I was really excited to see that you did, you gave some information on Christmasberry. And because I just purchased that one at Green Isle also. and I got 2 of them because the cool thing, I mean, you don't very often see a plant with purple flowers that has red berries and then the little leaves. It's a very attractive plant. And it was one of those things that I purchased without looking into it. I have a bad habit of doing that. So I was also happy to hear that you said that it likes moist conditions. So yay, I have that. But did you happen to look up what kind of sun that it needs? Do you know, is it like a full sun plant or a shade, or any idea on that one?
It looks like it can be full to part sun. I was looking at pictures of it in its natural environment, and it can cover a pretty broad area. The pictures I was seeing, it was in full sun, but also I saw the other picture I saw of it, it was in shade. So it looks like it's a very adaptable plant.
Okay, that's great to know. And thank you for highlighting all the different grasses too. I think that's important. And also the point that you brought up about the reason why we don't see fall in Florida, I think, is a lot of common landscape plants are chosen to be evergreen, or, there's a lot of people who live in cities and all they see is landscape plants. There's some places in Orlando that I've been where the only nature you see is what's in the medians and whatever's been planted there. So that's a very interesting point that you made about sometimes, that there's a reason we don't see that, but it exists. There is fall in Florida, absolutely. So just wanted to say I enjoyed that point. Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Ann Kennedy writes, can you consider reviewing all native oak trees in Florida for the future? Will that be, that's going to be a big, long conversation. And there are quite a few species of oak in Florida, and then some of them actually interbreed in their native ranges. So it can be tricky to identify what you're looking at. But yes, we will definitely consider that. That is a nice, challenging presentation to put together. Thank you, Anne, for joining us.
I think the podcast In Defense of Plants has an episode on oaks, and it goes into some of the details on the complexities of the species, because it really is difficult to identify them, particularly because they will hybridize between different closely related species. So, yeah.
Yeah, correct. And Anne, I don't know if you were one of the thousands of people that tuned into Doug Tallamy's recent presentations, whether it be with Audubon or some other conservation organization, but he always promotes the usage of oaks in one's landscape because it happens to be a keystone plant. Many different types of caterpillars, use the oak as their larval hosts, and in turn, those caterpillars feed birds. So it is definitely a plant that is promoted quite a bit by Doug. Another one that we actually touched on, and I think it was Kaylee that touched on it, but goldenrods are also favored. So he had a short list of plants that he said, not all natives performed equally, but if you are to choose just a few, I think oaks and goldenrods made it into a short list. So they are wonderful larval host and plants for biodiversity, period.
Yeah. As far as for the fall, to keep on theme with our presentation, turkey oaks, I know we didn't have an opportunity to talk about all the stuff that we wanted to because we only have an hour, so we only had to pick a handful of things, which is very hard. But turkey oaks are gorgeous in the fall. Oh my goodness. Especially if you go out and you hike in natural areas and you see them all turning bright, vibrant red and orange all the same time. That's amazing. So turkey oaks is a great one for the fall garden also.
I was going to do turkey oak, but on the last one, I did turkey oak, so I didn't want to do it again. But I love turkey oak. It's my favorite.
Yeah, I was curious. I was like, maybe I should add a few more slides. And then I was like, no, we'll just have fun talking about the ones we put together. Another one that I thought about was spice bush. So in case you guys are interested in planting some unusual shorter trees, spice bush is great. It actually happens to be the larval host for the spice bush swallowtail butterfly. So it's wonderful.
I just got one this year, and I think it's hardly had leaves on it at all since I got it. It just keeps getting eaten. I think I'm gonna have to get 2 or something. So every time
and the caterpillars are the cutest things ever too. I mean, they are the most adorable caterpillars I've ever seen in my life. I love the chubby caterpillars, but that one, I don't know. It's just the cutest thing. That's why I bought mine, because of the cute caterpillars.
Yeah, they have little faces on them.
All right. Well, any parting words before we conclude our presentation? In case you guys are interested in becoming FNPS members, 3 steps, fnps.org, join. If you happen to be in the area we serve, there's Cuplet Fern in the drop-down box for you once you get there. But Kaylee, Gia, Jennifer, any closing comments for this webisode of Garden Chat?
No, I think we had a great chat this time, and you know, if any other questions come in, you know, I'd always be happy to, you know, field that however to Mark or to us. But I feel like this was a wonderful chat, and thank you guys for all the information that everyone's put together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Yeah, that's just fun. All right, guys, this concludes our garden chat. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.